Hello, welcome back. This video is quite different from what I normally do. It's actually part of a series in which I talk about all of my tips and tricks for making models in BlockBench. And to do so, I will model, rig, texture, and animate Tenna from Deltarune. My goal is to make this tutorial as simple and productive as possible so you can click off satiated. When I first started using BlockBench, I found it very overwhelming, and there was a lot I wished I knew before I began. So hopefully you'll be better off after this video knowing what I know now. This first video here will cover how I model and rig entities. Keep in mind there are many tutorials and methods for using BlockBench out there. This series only covers what I do. If you want to do it differently, go for it. Nobody's method is wrong, but I operate by the motto, work smarter, not harder, and I reflect this in my work. As you'll see in a moment, that's going to be this video's literary theme, the video's motivational message. So the first thing I tend to do when I'm making the models is I set the UV settings to per face, not block. The reason I do per face is because I like to start off small and resize the model later, and with per face, when you resize the model, the texture will stay how you put it. After pasting in your reference picture, you can start off by pressing the little plus sign on the right to spawn in a little cube. And when you're moving the cube around, if you don't press anything and you just drag it, it will move at 1 pixel at a time, or 1 cube at a time. If you hold down shift, it will move every quarter of a cube. And if you hold down control, it will move every 10th of a cube. So if you hold down shift and control, you can get the cubes to move in a more precise manner, so you can get those finer details. And using the shift and control keys, it also works when you're rotating and scaling the cubes. A lot of what you're going to do when you're modeling and texturing and animating is you're just going to sort of figure it out as you go. So what I'm doing first is I'm starting off with the biggest pieces, like the main core pieces of the body, which are going to be the head and the torso. And I'm just kind of figuring out what shape I want the head and the torso to be. And again, especially here with the head, there's a lot of experimenting, a lot of figuring out what's gonna look best. I end up using 2 different cubes to get that depth that CRT TVs typically have, because I thought with just the 1 cube, it didn't look quite right. So at this point, I'm not doing anything new. I'm just testing things out, moving it around, and finishing up his body. So I'm just gonna speed it up, but it shouldn't be too fast, so you can still see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So the reason I'm only doing half of his body, so 1 arm, 1 leg, 1 antenna, is because I'm going to rig and texture all of that first, and then once that's done, I'll copy and paste it. So what you'll notice I'm doing here with the antenna is I'm breaking it into 2 pieces. And the reason I'm breaking it into 2 pieces like this is because I want to animate it with more detail. So between the 2 pieces, it's going to serve as, there's going to be a joint there. So the antenna can kind of bend forward in front of his face or sway more when he's moving. And since at this point too, I know how large I want his arms and legs to be, I am kind of dividing them in the middle to make elbows and knees. One important thing I didn't cover when I was doing the modeling process, this was a mistake I fixed all the way in the animation process, was clipping. So when you make blocks that are exactly the same size on the axes, there's a chance that when you start bending them, when you animate, they can clip, which is when, since they're exactly the same size, the program, it gets confused which face it should show. So it starts showing both of them at the same time, and it makes a really ugly effect. So to fix that, you can use the inflate section, and even if you inflate the piece even by 1/100th of a pixel or a cube, that still makes the cube you just inflated bigger. So the game will prioritize that one, so you won't get that ugly clipping effect. So what I'm doing here on the belt is I'm just adding a flat plane, and when I get to the texturing portion, you'll see why I'm doing that. But this plays into the motto of working smarter, not harder, and keeping it simple. BlockBench has a whole guide on how to make models fit into Minecraft, and one of the things you want to do is just keep it as simple as you can. So if you can use a flat plane instead of 2 antennas in this section, for example, do that. It'll fit in better with the general style of the game. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting all of the cubes into bones, or into groups. So all of the pieces that are part of the head will go into a group named head, all of the pieces in the torso go into the torso, the arm in the arm, so on and so forth. And then once the main groups are made, I'll go in and I'll make the finer details. So in the arm, the whole arm would be the bicep, the forearm, and the hand. And then what I named mid-arm would just be the elbow, and would be the elbow, so it would be the forearm and the hand, and then the hand is a separate group. So when you're animating, all 3 of those parts can move, but the arm will move every piece of the arm, the mid-arm will move the forearm and the hand will only move the hand. So it's kind of connected like a snake. Keeps things, they don't move independently unless they're by themselves towards the end, like the hand is. And even still, it's connected to the arm. Once you make all of the groups that you want and you sort them how you want. So I typically sort by putting everything into the torso group except for the legs, and then I put the torso and the legs into a group called body. So the arms, the head, they will move when the torso moves, but the legs won't. The legs will only move if I move the whole body. This just makes things a bit easier in the animation process later. Because at this point I wasn't sure how exactly I was going to animate him, I definitely overplanned, and I added in a lot of extra pieces. So for example, the tie, I wasn't sure if I wanted his tie to move, but I rigged it as a bone just in case. So once the pieces are all in the groups that you need, it's time to rig them. So you're going to use these little ball joints, and you're going to move them where you want the block to move. So like in the arm or the knee, if I want the forearm or the shin to move in a way that is connected to the bicep or the actual thigh, you need to put it like in between the two groups so it's connected. If you put the joint piece, the pivot point, in like the middle of the block, it'll move in the middle of the block and it won't look quite right. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. At this point, the model's looking pretty good. It's definitely unfinished, but it's looking pretty good. You can make really simple models and be completely fine, because typically the shape of the model is not what makes or breaks your creation. That typically lies with the textures, which I will be covering how I texture my models in the next video. I hope to see you then. Thank you for watching until the end, and I will see you next time.